好开心的接受我啊！祝所有的爸爸们父亲节快乐！我们庆祝母亲节，也要庆祝父亲节。感谢 Kathy 开心健身平台 With Chinese 美国华人联合会 UCA 以及龙吟卫视一起推出这个特别有意思的父亲节活动。我非常高兴有机会作为主持人。我叫利敖，是大学2年级的大学生。下面我用英文与 Steve 对话，听听他作为父亲的分享。我准备了一些问题，也欢迎大家在 chat box 里面问他们自己的问题。我们开始吧。Let me introduce our speaker for today, Steve. Steve is here to share with us some of his ideas and experiences with being a successful dad. His son Chris and his daughter-in-law Jialu and granddaughter Chloe are thriving in Bellevue, Washington. Steve met Deborah and Justin 17 years ago, and together they've enjoyed a happy, successful, and rewarding family life. As a father, Steve has strived to teach Justin and Chris how to be happy, accomplished adults, as well as leaders. He's coached them how to accomplish significant goals with efficiency, fun, and with a minimum amount of drama. Steve lives in Palo Alto with his wife, Deborah. He's lived in the Bay Area since 1978 and has spent more than 40 years working in the life science and high-tech industries until retiring as a VP in the pharmaceutical industry. Steve grew up in a large family and has 6 brothers and sisters. His parents made a conscious effort to make sure that all their children would be well-educated, healthy, self-sufficient, and happy, positive members of their community. Steve has continued this tradition with his own family. Everyone, let's welcome Steve.
Thank you, Leo. So it's great to be here, and thank you for the invitation. For Father's Day, Justin is coming down from San Francisco this evening, and he's taking me out for a nice dinner, me and Deborah, tomorrow. And then I'll have a Zoom call, or probably a WeChat call, with Chloe and her parents up in Bellevue tomorrow. So really looking forward to that. Really enjoy the role of being a grandparent. It's a lot more fun than I thought it would ever be. So thank you.
Sounds really fun. All right, let's move on to the questions then. In your role, in your view, what should be a father's role in their family?
So as a father, you have many roles and responsibilities. And I think at the highest level, there's sort of a couple things that I keep in mind. One is that my wife and I are a team, and she has a certain role and certain behaviors that she plays. And then I also come in and have a slightly different perspective on many actions. And I'm also a key believer that you really want your family set up to succeed, okay? And that means that you have to train your family or your sons to be successful adults. And when I compare my behaviors and towards those of my wife's, Deborah can be much more protective of the children and want to shelter them from the world when they were young. My role was to let the children understand that the world is not a perfect place, but also that you're going to have tests and challenges and strife as a normal part of life, and that's okay, and that you develop skills for dealing with those challenges. And that my role as a dad was to make sure that the tests and challenges that were coming towards my sons were not overwhelming for them. And to the extent that I saw them doing something that I knew it was a mistake, I'd let them make the mistake so that they can realize that you can make a mistake and recover. So, you know, the role and that's the role my dad taught me. So I'm just perpetuating what my dad taught me, and I think what his dad taught him. So it's just going on through the ages here. But I think when you compare the things that I taught my sons versus what their moms taught them, it's a complementary arrangement. And that the benefit is that both of Chris and Justin have done remarkably well as adults. And I think it's because we set them up to succeed.
So in essence, you're saying that the father's role is to perhaps teach responsibility and to keep pursuing their interests in the face of making mistakes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that, you know, when, you know, things would happen in junior high and, you know, mom's response was to try to fix them. And my response was, it's for the children to fix them. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I would say is it's a balance. Okay. You know, you can't just throw your children into a 20-foot deep pool and say, well, it's time to learn how to swim. You don't do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a part of it. So.
Yeah. Going to a bit more of a specific topic, parents and teens nowadays, they both experience great anxiety and stress for specifically college and choosing their major. How should parents help their kids decide on a future major?
So I think people are more concerned about college major decisions than they really need to be. Okay. I was in the pharmaceutical business, and our take on it is that the children that are in school today, if they don't have bad habits or genetic problems, they're going to live to at least 100 years old. Okay.
Wow.
So, right. Yeah. So they're going to have a lot of time to try things multiple times. Okay. And the data also shows that more than half of college students change their major when they're in college. Okay. And what I've seen is that a lot of children don't know what they want to do. And as a result of that, they frequently, when they look at what they should do in college, they take a look at what did their parents do. Okay. And what their parents did may not be what's best for them. Okay. I know when I first applied to college, I applied for electrical engineering because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my dad was an electrical engineer, right? and that set up a whole series of things that I later had to reverse because I finally figured out that I was really a business major. Okay. But with colleges, there's two big sources of stress here from my perspective. One is there's this competition at school to be the best, and people are fighting actually with the other students in their class, right?
Yeah. And
there's this goal that everybody has to be in the top 1% or top 5% of their class, okay? And there's no data to support that that's really true, okay? So, you know, you need to understand what you're good at and what you're doing in school. The parents' role is to make sure that the stress at school isn't compounded at home, right? That at home should be a safe spot, right? You should be, this is where you go home and you talk to your parents about the stresses that are going on and these people that are taking 0 period AP classes and all this other stuff, right? And you tell them, you know, you're really better off with an extra hour's sleep than wandering the school campus at 6:30 in the morning. So that's a long answer, Leo, but I think, you know, the parents know their children. They know what their skills and abilities are. And yes, it's okay to ask your children to be stretched a little bit, but, you know, thinking everybody at Pally needs to take 28 AP classes is crazy.
Yeah. I had a similar experience as you. Coming into college, my first year, I was a business major because both my parents were business people. And I thought, okay, that's the path that I'm destined to take. But eventually I switched into CS in my second year, and my parents both supporting me really helped ease my mind and just allowed me to pursue that interest more freely. Yeah, I really get where you're coming from.
That's great. And, to the extent that if most students are in the wrong major when they start, it's probably more important to pick a school that has a broad range of majors so that after you've taken all the first year survey classes, you can transfer over to another major and not have to apply to another school because you've ended up in the wrong institution. And
you want to keep your options open. Yeah. All right, moving on from that, there's a lot of stress in high school and college. How did you help your children deal with challenges that they experienced in academics or even their personal life during these periods?
Okay. So this is sort of a little variation on what we've talked about, okay? I think there's a knee-jerk reaction to try to fix every problem when you hear about it, okay?
Yeah.
And children or young adults are exposed to all kinds of problems and challenges. And part of the best things, one of the key things that the parents can do is just actively listen to what the children are saying, listen to what's going on in their lives, and then sort of step back from it and say, is this a healthy situation? Is this something that should be changed? Is it okay? And help them identify that there's all these different stimulations that are coming at them and that a fair chunk of them they can ignore, right? The challenge you have nowadays with cell phones and everything is people get pinged multiple times every minute, and there's an unconscious need to respond or act on every stimulation that comes, and you just get lost, right?
Notifications on your phone.
Yeah. So from that perspective, really understand that immediate response isn't required most of the time, and in fact, that's a bad behavior as an adult and at work. That you really want to have some time to think about things and understand what your options are and work through it.
So it's best No, go on.
Yeah. No, keep going, Leo. I don't want this to be a monologue.
No, that's fine. So what you're saying is it's best to stay relaxed and first look at the problem at hand before thinking about what steps you should take to solve it. And that's a better approach.
Yeah. So the first question is this a problem that needs to be solved? Right?
Yeah.
A lot of times it's not. Okay. And then if it is a problem that needs to be solved, what are your options? Weigh the pros and cons and kind of calmly go through that. When the parents get excited and agitated and your voice goes up, that emotional transfers to your children. Okay. And to the extent that you get all of these things flowing and stuff like that, you tend to your answers may not be as good as a well thought out one that's, methodically gone through. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it teaches your children that there are stressful situations, and they're in your personal life, they're in your academic life, and you certainly see them at work.
Yeah.
And to the extent that you can stay calm and supportive, things like that, you will get through these things without all kinds of emotional damage and baggage, and you won't hurt the other people around you. Okay. And if you take a look at someone who wants to be a senior leader in business or anything like that, you have to stay calm when the world's on fire. Okay.
Keep your emotions under control.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And you need to teach it. I don't want to use the word need, but it's very helpful to stay calm so your children stay calm. And when people are calm or calmer, they will tell you more about what the problem is instead of telling you what you think you want to hear. So you can come up with a better answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, moving on to our next question. So you come from the pharmaceutical industry, so you're aware of the increase in mental health issues, especially in youth and young adults. With mental health issues on the rise, how would you suggest parents and teens help to deal with these issues or maybe even prevent them?
I think while I've been in the life science industries, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychoanalyst or anything else like that. And that my observations are probably similar to many of the people that are on this meeting today, which is that I think that people, as a result of technology, are not as civil or social as they used to be. Okay. People say things on WeChat or WhatsApp or any of those. They say things that they would never say to someone to their face.
Real life. Yeah.
Okay. Right. And that, and it's unnecessary. Okay. So the first thing I would take a look at is what's going on in your social network and things like that, and that to the extent that you may have friends or acquaintances in that are toxic, right? And you may want to try to avoid that. The other thing is that I think having good conversations with your children, typically at dinner time. There's no cell phones, there's no television, it's an hour's discussion every day, family time about what's going on, what's the hearing. And instead of, some parents fall into the trap that every discussion has to be a teaching moment, right? And right, and I have discussions with people. And I say, well, they had a discussion with their child. And I say, well, was it a discussion or was it a lecture? Right?
Exactly. Sometimes you just need to talk with your kids.
Yeah. So, part of the, going back, this is a long answer, Leo, and I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. One of the things that I did as a dad, which I think helped Justin and Chris, is I would ask them leading questions about things. Well, why do you think this is behaving this way? Why do you think that's going on? And I'll be honest with you, when they were in high school, and especially when they're in college, I didn't help them with calculus. I didn't help them with, organic chemistry, classes. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Where I helped them with was their critical thinking. Right? Get them to think about stuff, get them to look at that there's more than one perspective. And over time, they developed a tool set which helped them deal with all this noise that's in the world, right? What do you have to respond to? What do you don't have to respond to? How do you manage the supply of noise is infinite, right? Yeah. And to the extent that you respond or get stimulated by all of it, of course, it's going to lead to mental health issues.
You're just trying to take on too much at the same time.
Well, when you're young, your tools and talents for dealing with all of this stuff is just being developed, right? So, here I am in my 60s and I see all this noise and gosh, well, I've figured out a way over the last 45 years to not deal with it. But I look at someone who's 18 or 19, well, guess what? They haven't figured that out. But to the extent that I can avoid being a source of noise. That's good.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about enough about this kind of dark topic of mental health. Let's move on to community service. Okay. Do you think that community involvement is important, and if so, why?
Yeah, I think I think the United States and the world could certainly see there's big areas of opportunity in civil behavior, right, in civil society. And I think that community service is a good way to help raise community awareness and civil society. When you do community service, you frequently encounter many people in the community who you were not aware of. And through those interactions, you learn more about people, you learn more about other perspectives, you learn all kinds of things that aren't in textbooks.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's the school of life. Okay. The other thing that it does is it exposes you to a different set of leaders. You see how different people deal with different types of situations. You see a broader range of issues and challenges that are going on. And when you're doing it as community service, it's frequently, you're an observer to it, right? So, so it's great. You get to see somebody else solve a problem or a challenge, right? And you may play some role in solving it, but you're not really responsible for it, but you get the benefit of watching, right?
Yeah.
And, the thing I think, in a previous conversation, Leo, you and I had is that over time, you develop this library of experiences in your brain. And that library is something that you go to in the future. And some people call that library wisdom. Okay. And I think community service is a great way to help build the civil society. It's a great way for you to add new books to your library of experiences. I think people who are part of teams and things like that, they see leadership techniques that work, leadership techniques that don't work, or some that are mediocre, things like that. And, one of the things that I've heard from Deborah is that there's quite a few people who, when they get out of school and they get a job, they start asking questions about, why am I not being promoted, right? Why am I in the same job?
Why are you stuck?
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And what they probably have, and they say these other people are getting promoted, right? Well, these other people have a bigger library. Okay, it's that simple, right? And they've seen more problems, they've seen more issues, they've got more experiences, they've got more stories, even though they're the same age as you. Right? So I think, community service is an opportunity for a lot of people, and you're not being asked typically for money, you're being asked for time, which in a strange way is actually more valuable than money.
Yeah. So pretty much what you're saying is that what community service does is it provides you with certain things to add to your library skills, like leadership and teamwork, stuff like that, that you can't really find in an academic setting.
Yeah. So here, yeah, exactly, Leo. So for instance, we're aware of, there's some students at the high school, they're tutoring students from East Palo Alto. Okay. So those students that are doing the tutoring are being exposed to people who have had a different family life, different social life. Their language skills are different, and they're not in some country 8,000 miles away, right? They're 2 miles away.
The other side of town, yeah.
The other side of town, right? And this is a left-handed compliment, Leo, right? But I bet there's some of those students that are doing those tutoring in these low-income housings and housing, things like that, where there's all kinds of issues at home. And they come home back to Palo Alto and they say, life isn't as bad as it is on these other places. It
Yeah,
gives you a
exactly.
perspective.
Teaches you like to be more appreciative.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So good.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to our next question about college and being a young adult. How did you prepare your teens for college, and how did you prepare them for the transition to adulthood?
Okay. So by the time both Chris and Justin left for college, they knew how to cook. They knew how to use tools. They knew how the banking system worked. They knew how to change a tire on their car. They knew how to get their car serviced. So they were able to go into a dormitory, and they had all of the life skills that were required to interact with their dorm mates. Okay. They already had the academics requirements and stuff done, but they had all these other dimensions that are out there. So when they went in, they met new friends, they met new people, they were aligned with the right classes, but their social skills were very good. Their life skills were very good. And as a result of that, when they were in school, really what they're focusing on was both their academics and their professional career development, right? So instead of having grown up in a protected environment where they were focused strictly on academics and didn't even know how to use a can opener or a dishwasher or anything else like that.
Just the bookworm.
Yeah. And they were confident that they could take care of themselves there, right? We didn't get any strange phone calls about basic things in life that we were able to do it, right?
How to run a washer or dryer, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, the difference between being a child and an adult is essentially independence, where you know how to do your own chores, your own bills, where you can just live on your own and function like
if
your parents.
Yeah, exactly, Leo. To the extent that you are self-sufficient, right? Your stress levels will drop dramatically, right? To your earlier question, about how do you reduce stress? This is part of it. You make sure that you understand how life works and how the world works and things like that, and you're ready to deal with it, right? So.
Moving on to another topic about young adulthood, about confidence. How important would you say is confidence for young adults, and how do you build that confidence?
Confidence is built on a steady string of successes and failures, okay? And by a failure being something that occurred that you then fixed, okay? So that as time goes on, the challenges that you're facing, you strive to overcome them, you accomplish them, and then you use what you've learned there to deal with a challenge that's bigger or larger, more complex, things like that. And as you get comfortable with your skill set and you get comfortable with yourself, you respect yourself, right? And that is a key part of confidence, right? And it doesn't mean you're an extrovert. There's incompetent extroverts. Right? But you have to have belief in yourself that you are capable. And then when you know you're capable, that is another very good life skill to have, so that when other people challenge you on your capabilities and confidences, you don't have some little voice in the back of your head going, yeah, maybe this person's right.
Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not up to snuff.
Yeah. And really what you want to do is, having a little voice go in the back of your mind going, yeah, let it go. You're not worth listening to.
Well, there's actually a question in the chat from Jihua Wang. She asks, how do you motivate your kids to maintain a good father-kid relationship? Teens are easy to be attracted by things such as computer games. She's discussed with her kid and tried to find his drives and motivations, but it's been difficult.
So games, I think, is a huge problem for a lot of people, right? And teens are also trying to be independent, right? And some of them are more independent than others. And the strive for independence and rebellion against the parents is a classic issue that's out there, right? Every family deals with that one way or the other. On one hand, as a parent, you want your children to be independent. On the other hand, it annoys you when they are being independent, right? Yeah. Right. So I guess, but a family is not a democracy. Mm-hmm. Okay. And one of the things that you can do is you try to align when you're at work, okay, they have an easier choice in that the compensation system is designed to encourage certain behaviors.
Yeah.
And to the extent that you're at home, you're dealing with a teenager, you may have to look at how do you align benefits to behaviors. Okay. And, you can get a budget for this is how much time you have for video games and things like that. You can turn the Wi-Fi off, right? Yeah. Or you can you make it, and that the access to the games is a reward for other behaviors, right? It's not an entitlement. And I think that's, potentially one way to take a look at it.
That's a way to motivate them while also not just completely taking what they like away.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like in the workplace where instead of the compensation being their salary, it's doing fun things that they like, such as video games.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds similar to something that my family did as well, actually. Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. You've been both a parent and a step-parent. Are there any differences that you experience between these two roles?
Yes. Okay. With my son, Chris, I'm his natural father, right? So I grew up being a father as he grew up being a son. And we're both learning as you go along, okay?
Yeah.
And I had legitimate authority as dad, okay? And over time, of course, we had this loving, respectful, successful, positive relationships that extends to this day. When I met Justin, he was 10 years old. He already had a dad.
Yeah.
Okay. I was not his legitimate dad, and I didn't have legitimate authority over him. Mm-hmm. So with Justin, through 17 years of respect, fathering, mentoring, I think I'm as an informal dad.
Yeah.
All right. But I gave him the same love, attention, affection that I gave Chris. So my behavior story, but in my mind, I know he has another dad, right? Yeah. He has his real dad, right? Mm-hmm. And very, very conscious of that. Mm-hmm. And I've never done anything to hurt the reputation of his dad.
Yeah.
I did not view him as a competitor, right? Okay. The other thing is that when, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this later, Leo, is when you get married, you're not just marrying your spouse, you're marrying the spouse's family. They come as part of the deal.
Yeah.
Okay. And So I got Justin, right? All right. And it was a very conscious effort on my part to make sure that Justin was not dealt with as a second-class person.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's just the way I was raised. It was also very good protection on my marriage to Deborah, because to the extent the situation developed, she had to pick between Justin or me. I know who would win that competition.
Exactly.
It would be Justin. So if somebody was going to be fired, it would be me.
Yeah.
So the long answer.
No, it's fine. It was a great answer. There's another question in the chat. Many dads think that raising children is just the mom's job. Do you have any suggestions for how to deal with those dads?
Okay, so I love this question, Leo. Okay. I had my first job in 1972. I think that was before you were born.
Yeah, a little bit before I was born.
A little bit. Okay. And there's a lot of men who believe that the job is the reason for life, and the dad's role is to be the provider of the money. And I certainly understand that. Okay. Almost half the businesses that I worked for in my career are gone.
Yeah.
Okay. I built a distribution center in Sacramento. It's gone. I built a factory in Singapore. It's gone. I built a factory in Shanghai. It's gone. Right. And I did all these other fantastic professional accomplishments, and almost all of them are gone. Right. So when people say, as a man, you're always sort of thinking about what's your legacy. Well, heck, I spent years traveling the world doing all this stuff, and none of it's there anymore.
Yeah.
And that what's still here,
it's been forgotten.
It's long gone and forgotten. And that what's still here is my 2 sons and my granddaughter and my wife. And this is going to be my legacy. Right. So to the extent that, if somebody is thinking that their role is to stay at work and let the wife deal with things
and just build a career.
Yeah, build a career. When that person retires, that world disappears, and the only world you have left is this one with your family and your children. Yeah. And it sure would be nice to be part of the building process for that.
Yeah. Because your legacy and the impact that you leave on the world, it's really your family line.
Yeah.
Your lineage that you leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another question in the chat. Many dads are busy with their work life and often do not have much time. Steve, you had an impressive career while also managing to have a good relationship with your family. Yeah. How did you maintain work-life balance while raising your children?
Okay, so there's a couple components to that. So my personality is one where I like to help people grow their own careers, okay? Mm-hmm. And that part of them growing their careers is that they have to be successful at work.
Yeah.
So over time, when I'm at work, my goal was to make sure that what my departments were working on was important to the business, and that it was the efforts were manageable to the extent that they did not require superhuman behavior. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the other thing, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with in leadership, is your job is not to do your staff's job. Mm-hmm. Okay. I see this all the time, right? People get a promotion and then they get their new job, but they're still doing their old job.
They're doing their old tasks.
Right. So I was the vice president. I had responsibility that spanned 3 continents. I spent 40 to 45 hours a week at work. Right? So I was home on the weekends. I made sure that my staff was there, that the support teams were there. And to the extent that somebody has a job that requires them to be at work 60, 80, so many hours that it interferes with their family life, I would suggest that they take a look at it and say, how much of the work are they doing? Do they really need to do? Is it something that somebody else should be doing? And you have to set limits, okay? I think the younger people, the millennials, are doing a much better job at this than the middle-aged and older people at work.
Older generations.
The older generation, right? And, you know, the funny thing about it is that, you know, these people that work 70 or however many hours are, when they're gone, nobody remembers that they were there doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's kind of like the raising the family then.
Yeah.
Instead of micromanaging your kids and doing all of what they need to do for them, you just help to ensure that they're able to do what they need to do on their own.
Exactly.
So there's a parallel. Yeah. There's another question from Xin. His question is, if their child is afraid of facing a new challenge and get worried easily when something's changed, how should the parents help?
How old is the child?
Xin, do you know how old? He's 12. The child is 12.
Oh. So typically you need to do some kind of confidence building exercises, right? So something happened probably somewhere along the line where they lost their confidence, right? So you need to take a look, or I hate using the word you need to. I would suggest that you take a look at what are the things that the child is good at, leverage those experiences to maybe expand their role or use so that they can build more confidence around it. The other thing that can happen is if they're around other children who are successful and accomplished, that can also be a good way to improve the performance of someone, is to have their peers be successful, right? And then, you know, it's one thing when, you know, your parents are telling you to go off a diving board, right, and telling you it's safe. It's another one when they see their you know, their buddy, you know, Johnny or something jumping off the diving
doing
board.
Wild flips off the board.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the first step to deal with that issue is to build their confidence.
Yeah.
And to avoid comparing them to their peers who may have had success in other areas.
Well, at 12 and stuff like that, there's some peer pressure, there's family pressure and things like that. But I think, you know, the core issue is they need to build their self-confidence, and you can't just have somebody read a book about getting self-confident. That is something that you need to develop by actually accomplishing on a regular basis a series of activities and events that have met or exceeded your expectations.
Yeah. Oh, a follow-up question: is there a difference in the situation if they are 22 instead of 12?
They're 22?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so when you're in your 20s, that's okay. So I'm not a doctor, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But based on what I've read, is between like 22 and 26, that's when a lot of the wiring in your brain gets locked in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you've got a 22-year-old who has challenges and stuff in these areas, you might want to be talking about some professional help before that wiring gets solidified.
Get counseling from a professional.
Yeah. The other thing is where is the lack of confidence coming from? It's one thing, if you're outside and this lack of confidence is being driven by an external source. It's another thing if inside the house, through something that no one's noticing, that there's a reinforcement going on inside the home that's defeating the person's confidence. So you may need to have somebody from an external perspective take a look at what's going on in the family.
A question from Gracie. Asian families in particular are known for striving to provide the best education for their children. However, there is a perceived bias towards this effort. Do you see this bias in your family and your social circle?
I think I'm very aware of the drive for academic excellence. I think historically, when you look at the history of China and the exams and stuff, academic excellence was the one clear way to advancement in China. So I know this is a practice that's been passed on for generation after generation. It's
been reinforced.
It's been really reinforced. Okay. The thing that I would suggest to people is they take a look at is in today's world, academic excellence on its own is a key element, but you also have to have these soft skills. And especially for people who want to get into leadership roles, you have to have these soft skills developed and work through it.
Yeah.
The other thing to take a look at is I'm a believer that when your student goes to a university, okay, and my wife Deborah is also a firm believer, is that it's better for your student or your child to be in the top 25th percentile of the students at that school. You don't want your student to be in the bottom 25th percentile or the bottom 5 percentile because their life will be miserable.
Yeah.
Right?
They won't feel they'll feel like an imposter with the imposter syndrome.
Well, that's imposter, but what will happen is that you're going to be in classrooms where your peers could be dramatically different than you. And that is bound to have issues on your self-confidence and things like that, right? Jack Welch, who was the big time CEO at GE. GE's got some challenges now, but he turned it into a superstar, right?
Yeah.
And he said the best thing that Harvard did for him is that they rejected him, right? And he went to Boston University. And when he was at Boston University, he was a superstar there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that helped build his confidence.
It really built his confidence. Deborah did something curious with Justin. Justin, I was envious of Justin, and that's starting in either late middle school or early high school. He knew he wanted to be a doctor, okay? And I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was 32, okay? Yeah. Right, 20 years difference on that, okay? And Deborah spent some time taking a look at medical school and how do you get into it, things like that, because you always have an interest. And one of the things that she picked up on is that one of the key determinants, no surprise, of getting into medical school is that you had to have a stellar GPA coming out of your undergrad program, right?
Yeah.
So, and the medical schools weren't that picky about where you went for undergrad. Okay. So, the US News World Report came out and it ranked all the universities. And Justin started talking about where he was going to apply to, right? And Deborah said, you cannot apply to any of the schools in the top 20 You are forbidden to do that, because if you get into one of those schools, you're going to be a B student rather than an A student. Right? So, and guess what? That's what happened. So he didn't apply to any of them. He went to another school. He did really well with it and ended up working up. So anyway, Leo, this is a long answer.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So.
I feel like it's something that the Asian community really needs to reflect on, you know? It's not just about going to the best school possible. It's like you said, the library of skills and building confidence from a young age.
Yeah. So yeah. So once you get out of school and you're at work, you know, a top tier university may give you a slight advantage as to where you work on your first job. Okay. But after you've had that first job, nobody cares what university you went to, right? What they ask you about in your interviews is, what are you actually accomplishing at your current job, right? And you need a really good story about what you're doing at your current job. And, you know, as time goes on, you know, what were your accomplishments at your last 3 jobs, right? You know, when you're 38 years old, no one's going to come back and say, when you took calculus at Berkeley 18 years ago, you know, what was the best equation you solved?
Do this problem real quick.
Right.
So we talked a lot about, sorry. We talked a lot about fatherhood and developing children from a young age. I know that there's a lot of moms online. So Steve, can I ask, what are your thoughts on the role of a husband?
So I'm going to circle around a little bit to the parts of the earlier discussion, which is one is a husband's role is to bring a sort of a different perspective to the table. So, and it's just another perspective. Okay, so there's that. Yeah. So from the child rearing point of view, I'm more inclined to let the children learn by example. Okay, whether it's a good example or a bad example. Okay, but the other thing is that in the role of a husband, you need to be aligned with your wife, that the strategy that you're following with your children is something that both of you agree to, right? You can't be out of sync with your wife.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would tell people, and this has become very apparent to me now that I'm a grandfather, is when I watch my granddaughter, she copies every behavior that she sees in the house. Literally every single behavior. She doesn't know how to use a cell phone, but she walks around with it by the side of her head. She's got everything else like that, right? And the husband needs to treat the wife like the princess she is, right? You know, and show that love and affection goes to the wife, it goes to the children, because the children are going to watch the dad's behavior, and if they're a boy, they're going to mimic it at some point. And if the child is a girl, they're going to get some messages from the dad's behavior also. So you are clearly a role model, right? And you know, you really need to be sure that the behaviors you're doing, you're aware that your children are going to copy them, right? So.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time, so I would just like to ask you: do you have any closing thoughts or advice for parents in general?
Listening is super important. It's real easy to interrupt someone when they start talking and try to give them the answer, or compete with them when they're telling a story, things like that. As a dad, as a husband, as a leader in business, it's really difficult to learn something new when you're talking, right? So I would say, to the extent that, there's one takeaway from here: be a good listener, all right? And you may not have the answers to anything, but the person who's talking to you about the issue or challenge will feel better knowing that someone listened to them. And who knows, you might be able to help them. So.
It appears that I missed the question. Sorry, could you answer this real quick?
Sure.
How can a dad help their child lose weight, especially if they are picky eaters?
Especially if they're picky eaters?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess what they're saying is they only like to eat perhaps like high calorie food, maybe?
Yeah.
Food that tastes good.
Yeah. So I have that problem with my own weight. Okay. So I found my most effective thing is get those foods out of the house so you're not tempted by them. Right.
Just reduce the access in general.
Yeah, reduce the access. The classic solution to weight loss is more calorie burn, less calorie consumption. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is athletics, sporting, things like that are a key part of doing that. A regular you commented earlier, Leo, about mental health, stress, things like that. Yeah. Exercise and sport is a wonderful way to help relieve stress. It's a great way to deal with weight control issues. And to the extent that you find things that you can do with your children, it's a good bonding experience. So, to the extent that you have a child, I would look for things that you can do together: bicycling, hiking, sailing, anything that gets you out of the house. Because part of the problem is the sedentary life cycle, and COVID certainly hasn't helped that.
Yeah, the past 2 years, everyone's just been indoors, like not moving, staying inside. Yeah. Well, we are sadly out of time. Steve, thank you so much for your wonderful sharing. You have so much wisdom and experience to share with us. I know you have like a lot of passion to help with youth leadership, and that many parents want to learn from you. I learned a lot from you as well, and I look forward to future opportunities working with you. And thank you so much.
All right. It's been my pleasure, and I hope everyone has a great summer. We get COVID in the rearview mirror and get back to some nice socializing and less of this. Yeah.